You've been taught your whole life that debt is bad. Pay off your credit cards, live within your means. And for most people, that's decent advice. But here's what they don't tell you. The wealthiest people on the planet don't avoid debt, they use it strategically. Jeff Bezos borrows against his Amazon shares instead of selling them. Real estate billionaires build empires entirely on borrowed money. They figured out something the rest of us haven't. There are two kinds of debt. One makes you poor, the other makes you rich. Think about how you're taxed. You work to earn money, the government takes a slice before you even see it. You spend what's left and pay sales tax. When you die, estate taxes take another chunk. The system taxes your income at every step. But billionaires figured out a loophole. Borrowed money is not income. The IRS cannot tax alone. When a billionaire needs $100 million, they don't sell stock and pay 30% in capital gains tax. They walk into a bank, pledge their stock as collateral, and borrow $100 million at, say, 3% interest. They get the cash, pay zero taxes, and their stock keeps growing in value. This is called the buy, borrow, die strategy, and it's completely legal. The math is staggering. If they sold $100 million in stock, they'd lose $30 million to taxes instantly. Instead, they borrow it. The interest costs them $3 million a year, but if their stock appreciates at 15%, that's a $15 million gain. They're up $12 million compared to selling every single year. This is why the wealthy often pay lower effective tax rates than their employees. They understand how the system actually works. Now you're thinking, great, I'm not a billionaire. How does this apply to me? This is where it gets interesting. The same principle works at any level. It's called leverage, and it's the most powerful wealth-building tool for regular people. You've probably already used it. A mortgage is leverage. You put down $50,000 to control a $500,000 asset. If that house appreciates 10%, you didn't just make 10% on your 50 grand. You made $50,000, a 100% return on your actual cash investment. That's why real estate has created so many millionaires, not because houses are magic, but because leverage is. The second way the wealthy use debt is to buy assets that produce income. This is the heart of real estate empires. You borrow money at 5% interest to buy a property that generates a 10% return. The tenant pays your mortgage, the asset appreciates, and you keep the difference. For example, you borrow $200,000 for a rental property. Your mortgage is about $1,000 a month. You rent it for $1,500. That's $500 of positive cash flow in your pocket every month, while someone else pays off your loan. 30 years later, you own a valuable asset, free and clear, all from your initial down payment. The key distinction is simple. Bad debt pays for things that go down in value, car loans, credit card splurges. Good debt pays for things that go up in value and generate income, real estate, a business, productive investments. Billionaires almost exclusively use the second kind. The goal isn't just to be debt-free, it's to be free from bad debt while learning to use good debt as the powerful tool it is. It's time to stop fearing debt and start understanding it.
What if there was a way to watch your investments grow for decades, use that wealth to live on, and then ensure that not a single dollar of that growth was ever taxed? The ultra-wealthy have been doing it for generations. It's a completely legal three-step strategy: buy, borrow, die. And understanding it is the key that separates the financially savvy from everyone else. Most of us operate on a simple premise: buy an asset, watch it appreciate, and then sell it for a profit. But that's the trap. The moment you sell, you trigger a taxable event. You hand over a chunk of your hard-earned gains to the government as capital gains tax. You lose out on all the future growth of that asset. And now you have a pile of cash you need to figure out how to reinvest. Selling is expensive in ways most people never calculate. So, what's the alternative? Instead of selling, billionaires borrow. Take Warren Buffett. He hasn't sold the vast majority of his Berkshire Hathaway shares in decades. He doesn't need to. When he requires cash, he simply takes out low-interest loans using his stock portfolio as collateral. This move is brilliant for two reasons. First, loan proceeds are not taxable income. He gets millions in cash, tax-free. Second, and more importantly, his shares, the real engine of his wealth, remain untouched, continuing to compound year after year. He never triggers that taxable event. Now, for the final, almost unbelievable step, die. Under current U.S. tax law, when someone passes away, their heirs inherit those assets at a stepped-up cost basis. This legal term is a fancy way of saying the asset's value is reset to its market price on the date of death. All those decades of untaxed capital gains, they vanish, wiped away for tax purposes forever. Buy appreciating assets, borrow against them for liquidity, die, and pass the wealth on tax-free. Okay, so how does this apply to you? You don't need a billion-dollar portfolio to use this thinking. The core principle is universal, and it boils down to one simple rule: only borrow to buy assets that generate a return higher than your interest rate. This is the great divide. Most people borrow for consumption. They rack up 24% credit card debt to buy a new television that returns exactly 0%. They take out a 7% auto loan for a car that loses a fifth of its value the second they drive it off the lot. This is a guaranteed formula for getting poorer. The asset's value plummets, but the debt remains constant. Billionaires do the exact opposite. They never borrow for consumption. They only borrow for production. If you can borrow at 7% to buy a rental property generating a 12% annual return, the math is overwhelmingly in your favor. If you can use a margin loan at 6% on an investment portfolio that has historically returned 10%, you are using leverage to get ahead. You're using someone else's money to build your own wealth. The framework is simple, regardless of your income. First, stop using debt for anything that goes down in value. Cars, vacations, electronics, pay with cash you have or don't buy them. Second, start viewing debt as a strategic tool for acquiring assets. This could be a mortgage on your home, a home equity loan to fund an investment, or a small business loan to scale a cash-flowing operation. Shift your mindset from a consumer who borrows to spend to an investor who borrows to build. Debt is just a tool. It's a hammer. You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to break a window. The goal isn't to avoid debt. The goal is to use it the way the wealthy do, as an instrument that makes you richer, not poorer.